I think by now I've made my stance on Reload pretty clear. It was pretty good, and then they ruined it. And with the way that recent events, and especially He Who Shall Not Be Named, I really didn't think there was much hope left for Reload. And then with the news of the next big Reload map being themed around the Elites, a faction that didn't exist until Chapter 6 Season 2, and wasn't really relevant until, well, this season, I didn't have high hopes, and I was really expecting this to just be Surf City 2.0. And then they actually went and made a, well, I wouldn't say good, but decent update. Look, it could just be that the last update we got was Surf City, but Elite Stronghold is actually a pretty based map. Just like Surf City, Elite Stronghold only has 5 locations on it. Well, screw that, they just added a 6th location because they can do that apparently. Honestly, it's for the best since what's now known as Peerless Pier was an unnamed location, making this map feel pretty weird. But adding this location makes things feel more complete. In fact, with a recent update, for like the first time in Reload history, they actually made a bunch of smaller changes to the map that while most people won't point out and notice, they will have a better experience on this map thanks to the changes. Anyway, Elite Stronghold does what Surf City doesn't by actually giving its locations some space to breathe. There's a lot of space that serves as open battlegrounds that make up this map. Not everything needs to be a named location, and smaller landmarks are scattered around this map to balance things out. Oh yeah, and another thing that Elite Stronghold does that Surf City doesn't is actually make their locations good and well designed and fun to play on. Alright, let's do a quick summary of each location because I'm not spending that long on this. Top tier training is the only location in the little swampy biome, and this location serves as, you're gonna want to sit down for this one, top tier training is a training ground for the elites. Not only that, but this location's just based. It's pretty fun to play on, and this place even has a room with the cubes from the Arenas game mode that apparently people play. Elite Experiments and Elite Armory honestly blended together in my head. From the names, you can pretty much tell that both of these serve a similar role. However, Elite Armory has the giant room that stores, well, it did store the 0 point shard. Peerless Pier was originally a landmark, but as of the recent update, it has become its own full location. And I mean, fair enough, because how do you have locations like Sandy Sheets or Little Loot Lake, but a pier that's slightly smaller than a normal location is where we draw the line? Especially when this place wasn't even a named location, I would still end up dropping here for like half of my games. What can I say? I like dock locations. Hey, this is kind of random. Do you remember the raft from Chapter 5 Season 4? Well, they literally just took the raft, put it in its own little autumn biome, and called it Hostile Hold. Yeah, this place is just the raft from Chapter 5. Like, it has the towers, it has mostly the same props, it has a lot of the same rooms, so yeah, this is just the raft. So yeah, after like a minute of going through each location, all the locations on this map, except for one, but I'll get to that eventually, are pretty based. But this is a modern Reload, and not everything can just be as simple as a map being good unless if you're Venture or Slurp Rush. So let's talk about the bland, boring, and blah parts of this map. Firstly, the graphics of this map are not good. It's a modern Reload map, so of course it has to have the Chapter 5, Chapter 6, Chapter 7 blend of an art style, which is pretty ugly. I mean, out of the 4 maps now that use this style, Squid Grounds is still the only one that does it fine. And I guess you can give Nightmare Island a pass since it's meant to look dull, but man, this just doesn't look as good as Venture or Slurp Rush. I mean, they do try to balance this out with 4 different biomes. I mean, the snow biome looks pretty good, but the rest of this map still looks pretty bland. And speaking of bad stuff, let's talk about Chiseled Cubes, a new location that just uses the assets from Shiny Shafts. And yeah, this location sucks. Like, it really just sucks. The layout of this location is very vertical, with giant towers as far as the eye can see, which in builds isn't the worst thing ever, just a bit annoying. But in 0 builds, oh my god, this location sucks. Not to mention, this location doesn't feel like your Tilted Towers or Paradise Palms or Slurpy Swamp location, where you'll most likely have to go through it at some point during a match, which just makes this feel like a normal location that's no different than any other location that's just in the middle of the map now. And it's not even a good location either. And while ending on that note, I want to turn your attention over to the loot pool that makes up this map. Surprisingly, at first, I didn't really have much of an issue with this version of the loot pool. You know, when you had like the hollow twisters and the wrecker revolvers and the gatekeeper shotguns all around, and the loot pool was just full of overpowered items. You think I'd hate it, but I really didn't. Cause like, sure, the loot pool was full of overpowered items, but at least for once they were confident in making a wacky loot pool. My main issue with how the Reload loot pool has been handled was that they would replace a completely normal item with just a completely overpowered one, which then leads to one item being a lot stronger than every other item, which leads to a bad loot pool. And then that broken item would be replaced, another broken item would be added in its place, and the cycle would just repeat. But I mean, yeah, if you're gonna make an overpowered loot pool, at least don't make one thing overpowered. Make everything overpowered, and then you'll have a decently balanced overpowered loot pool. But we couldn't just end things at that, because a week later, Epic decided to mess up this loot pool. All the wacky items are gone, except for the Hollow Twister, for some reason. And now we have one of the worst shotgun loot pools ever, consisting of the Pump Shotgun, Morphite Tac, Infiltrator Pump, and the Combat. Ah, gross. And then, but just screw that, because we have another hotfix that threw out the Combat Shotgun and replaced it with the Iron Pump. The Iron Pump is an item that works the exact same as a normal pump. So we now have a shotgun meta that consists of 3 different pump shotguns and a tac. How do you mess things up this bad? Look, I already thought Reload had a bad loot pool when it had the Hammer Pump, Twin Hammers Prime, and the Chapter 3 Heavy, but this is pretty bad. Like, how do you go from one of the best shotgun loot pools in Reload history to this? We finally got a full loot pool reset, and then Epic did the same thing they've done with the loot pool for months and make pointless changes that are a negative for Reload. There's no way that Epic didn't playtest this and just go, yeah, this sucks, because this loot pool just sucks. For example, in the game you're seeing right now, I went the entire game without finding a single Morphite Tac, which, might I remind you, is the only shotgun in the loot pool that isn't a pump. I even managed to find an exotic Wrecker revolver before I could find a single tactical shotgun. And for someone like me, who prefers using auto shotguns, being forced to use a pump isn't very fun. And when you have a messy loot pool like this, items like the Hollow Twister being in the loot pool stand out a lot. Like, why are the 7 power gloves and cluster cannon here? Like, sure, the power gloves could be a cool item in Reload, but couldn't you wait like a month for the season to end before adding its main mobility item? Honestly, this just makes me miss the days from when Reload first started and we actually had a basic loot pool, consisting mostly of just Chapter 1 guns with a few other guns that actually felt like they had a place in the loot pool. Like, sure, new things like Morphite can be cool, but we haven't gotten a single new Morphite weapon since December of 2025. And speaking of which, why has an item like the Mammoth Pistol, which is one of the most iconic items for Reload, not show up since October of last year? The whole loot pool of Reload over the past few months has just been a mess, and I promise you, adding a 4th pump shotgun to the loot pool isn't going to fix anything. So, in conclusion, Elite Stronghold has some pretty good moments. It's a lot better than Surf City or even Nightmare Island, but of course, this is modern Reload, where a lot of times it seems like Epic doesn't even know what they want to do with this mode. So in conclusion, Elite Stronghold gets 1 thumbs up, and Epic, please figure out what you want to do with your game mode.